On this episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks, we are going to talk about some of the biggest tech news from the week. We'll discuss GPUs, crypto mining, and all the craziness in that space. Talk about our giveaway and introduce a special guest next. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks. We're switching things up today just a bit. Dave could not make it, so you'll have to deal with my mug for the most part here. Chris is with me. Chris, how you doing back there?
I'm hanging in there. I've been digging in a police cruiser all day trying to figure out why the camera's not working, so I'm a bit frazzled, but I'm here.
Why the camera's not working? You weren't in any trouble in the back of the police cruiser?
No, not today.
Okay, gotcha. Making sure. We also have a special guest here. I'll introduce him shortly. But before we do, and before we get to the main topic at hand, NVIDIA broke news yesterday that they are introducing the Lite hash rate. They're going to reduce the Ethereum hash rate on cards built in the future, 3070s, 3080s, and 3060 Ti's. We'll discuss that and whether or not that's the right move, how we think it'll impact the market. Before we do, though, we had a whole bunch of stuff go on this past week, a couple of big high-profile launches that we should probably discuss quickly before we get to the main topic at hand. And we should also just remind everybody, we have a crazy giveaway going on right now. Falcon Northwest is offering up a really top-end Ryzen and Radeon powered Talon. Oh, it's behind Chris. It's right there over his shoulder. That giveaway is going on for a few more days. It's got a really cool Destiny 2 theme. The team has actually streamed a bunch of Destiny 2 to pimp the machine also, worth, I think, just shy of $5,000. So we'll put the link in the chat and have people, check that out over on the site a little later. But keep that in mind. And I think, what do you think, Chris? Should we start with some of the Intel news from this week? Two big Intel stories this week?
Sure, let's go for it.
So I had a chance to test a couple of things this week. I didn't think ahead and unplug the Tiger Lake H notebook that's sitting next to me. But Intel, they were kind enough to give us a pre-release Intel Tiger Lake H based
real
thin
quick,
enthusiast
actually.
notebook. Sure, go ahead.
So when I flip this up on the screen, it's going to show off who our special guest is. So do we want to do an introduction real quick?
Oh, sure. Why not? So we have Andy Raffel from eTeknix here, a longtime friend. I've only seen him at trade shows and big events like CES, but I feel like I've known him forever. So we should probably say hello to Andy. Andy, you want to say hello to everybody?
Hey everyone, good to be here at, it's 10:30 at night here. So yeah, this was an interesting one for me, definitely.
It's early for you. I know your reputation, Andy. Don't pretend that 10:30 is late for you.
Hey, I'm getting old. You can see the gray hair now.
Yeah, at least you still have a full head of hair. Yes. I'll keep that to myself.
No comment.
So, Chris, you have that Tiger Lake machine
I
over
do.
there to
Here
show
we
off?
go.
Okay. So this was the guy. If you take a really close look at the machine, you can probably tell who manufactured it for Intel. But this was interesting. So Tiger Lake H45, the higher end 8-core Tiger Lake processors, we got to test it in this thin, it's just over 20 millimeters notebook, complete with 16 gigs of RAM and a GeForce RTX 3060. So really interesting, Intel is making some bold claims when they announced Tiger Lake H. They were saying, best gaming processor, highest single thread performance, et cetera, et cetera. And through the benchmarks, it basically did prove true to what Intel said. Single-threaded performance, exceptionally strong, like really good. It was the fastest single-thread performance we've seen in a notebook to date, including some of the latest higher-end Ryzen-powered notebooks. And that was through, a few different benchmarks, full system benchmarks. In PCMark, I think it was the second fastest we've tested. It was the fastest in speedometer, fastest single-thread in both Cinebenches and Geekbench. So really strong single-thread performance. But if you move over to the GPU tests with the 3060, we tested at 1080p. It lands in the middle of the pack because we don't have exactly, apples to apples comparisons with other notebooks. And lots of the latest machines have higher end GPUs than a 3060. But overall, really strong performance. Chris, did you get a chance to look at some of these numbers? What'd you think?
No, I have had a chance to catch up with the numbers today, but from what I'm seeing, at least on the GPU side, it's definitely falling in line. I think, So it's hard because when you're looking at the different TDP configurations with the different chips, even with the GPUs now, it's hard to say. So what is the TDP configuration of the 3060 in this machine compared to, say, the M15 there, for example?
So this one, if I'm remembering correctly, was an 80 watt config, and I think the M15 had the full, I want to say 125 watt. I might have that wrong, so don't hold me to it. So yeah, it ends up trailing that Alienware config with 3060.
Right. Well, in average frame rates, but I'm seeing with the minimum frame rates, it is doing a little bit better. So maybe a smoother run. Do you think
it was very
perceive that?
I think if I did, the completely CPU limited test like I do for CPU reviews, we probably could have, sussed out some of the differences there, but no one's going to do that when they buy a notebook. So, we stuck with the typical game test, and, we see it lands in the middle in the GPU test, but that's not really testing Tiger Lake H. Tiger Lake H 8 cores is obviously going to be plenty fast enough for gaming. It's going to land on the GPU to get those higher frame rates, but to see this kind of horsepower in 20 millimeters, really, really cool. So yeah, that's the guts there. So if you've ever opened up a thin gaming notebook from a particular partner, you would definitely recognize the internals of that machine.
I was gonna say, it certainly looks familiar. Noticing the 3 fan setup that it has.
It turned out to be somewhat loud. I'm forgetting where I was on the sound meter, but the deck, I thought it was getting pretty hot. It was breaking like 105 F at the hottest point, but the Alienware machine that we reviewed today hit like 130 F at the hottest point on the keyboard deck. And you do hear it. It's in the, it's above 50 dBs when it's really, really cranking. So if you're gaming, you would definitely want to be wearing headphones, but really not bad. Can't really complain.
Excellent.
Yep. And the other big piece of Intel news today. So although it was announced, I want to say end of 2019 or early 2020, or Mike, I'm sorry, I'm getting that wrong. End of 2020 was the Intel Optane memory H20 SSD. So if you remember way back in the day, I think it was 2019 when I first looked at the H10, the H20 incorporates Intel's latest 2nd gen Optane media with their latest, I want to say 144 layer 3D NAND on a single SSD. So it's a hybrid solution, uses the Optane memory to cache the most frequently used bits on the drive for quicker access. And then you have the typical NAND for bulk storage. We got to test it in a really nice HP Spectre X360 15-inch notebook. And it's basically an upgrade across the board over the H10. So we don't have an apples to apples in the machine because, it came pre-configured. But looking back at the previous gen, because it was using, older NAND and, previous gen controllers, and these drives have a special case where the PCI Express lanes are bifurcated. So even though it's by 4 PCI Express, 2 are for each controller. So you don't get the full bandwidth by 4 all the time unless, both sets of media are being accessed. But really strong performance in sequentials considering what it is, right? 3.3 gigs per second reads, 2.1 gigs per second writes. So not going to blow your socks off in terms of sequentials. But when the Optane comes into play, when data is cached on the drive, you get really strong 4K random transfers, especially 4K reads. And it's literally like twice as fast as like Intel 760p standalone SSD. So if you care about responsiveness in a system, you want those real and low latencies and really fast 4K access, it provides that. And if let's say it's in a thin machine with one M.2 slot, or you have somebody that's not real tech savvy and they're not going to be able to manage multiple drives, it makes a whole lot of sense to have something like this in there because you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So you're in the Crystal Disk Mark test that you have up on the screen right now, it is really like one of the weaker benchmarks to show. But if you scroll to the bottom of that page, Chris, jump to the PC Mark 10 tests. Like these are really the important tests, right? So there's 2 sets of numbers here for the H20 with the Optane cache disabled and with it enabled to show the acceleration. And with it disabled, it's still a very competitive drive with other mainstream PCIe Gen 3 drives. So it's right in the middle there with the acceleration disabled. But you turn on the acceleration and bang, it's like way out to a big lead. And even if I had included some PCI Express 4 drives in here, these trace-based tests don't show like crazy high transfers. This is a very competitive number with the best latency of the group as well. So in like real world scenarios where that cache is being utilized, very, very strong performance. And that's where it matters. That's the performance where it matters, in my opinion.
Right,
PC Mark and the 4K transfers.
I think a lot of people, when it comes to like Crystal Disk Mark, they look at it and, high numbers and things like that. But you're always going to see high numbers, on SLC drives and things like this. You got to remember QLC, hence why it's going to be affordable. And that's why you're going to see slightly different numbers on things like sequential tests in Crystal Disk Mark, because it's the QLC just letting it down. But when it actually has a chance to do these short little bursts, it's perfect, and you're not having to pay over the odds for it, which is, I don't know, Optane's always been a weird one for me, because it was like they tried to market it really well for a really short amount of time, and then it just died. Like, no one talks about it anymore.
Yeah, well, they're not going to make standalone Optane drives anymore. So, like the high performance, their Intel will no longer be making them. And I think it's just it's the kind of media where it might make more sense for Optane persistent memory in the data center, and for solutions like this, because it's so much more expensive than NAND. And NAND just got so good. Like the latest Phison controllers and firmware with the latest NAND are just so fast. It's hard to pay triple for a drive with slower sequentials, even though the 4Ks look so good on Optane. And
for, I guess, let's call them the average consumer, which, I mean, I guess for our kind of realm is DIY enthusiast and gamers. You're not even going to see the difference with these stupidly fast drives that are 3 times faster than this drive for their tasks. I mean, for what we do, we edit 6K raw footage. It does come in handy there. We're alleviating a bottleneck. For gamers and things like that, you could build 3 identical systems with, a 7,000 megabyte per second drive, Phison E18. You could do one with a Phison E16 doing 5,000 megabytes a second. And then, like a cheapy QLC drive doing 2,500. You're not going to see the difference.
Yeah, maybe a little bit in load times, but in terms of real world experience, it's so close. Absolutely.
Yeah, once you're actually in game, that's it, really, right?
Right.
It's really nice to see those long bars in the graphs, though.
It is. Yeah. It makes you feel better.
Surely that comes down to the scale you use, right?
Well, of course. Cool. So I think we'll move on, because I don't want to kill too much time on the news stories. Quickly, I also want to mention a story that went up today. Qualcomm just launched a brand new Snapdragon platform for premium tier mid-range phones, the Snapdragon 778. So this is their lectest octal-core SoC for mid-range phones with updated GPU, updated 5G modem, updated AI capabilities, octal core. I want to say there's one premium core. I'm forgetting which ARM architecture it's using. Let me just take a quick peek here, because I'm sure it is in the article. So 8-core Cairo 670 CPU up to 2.4 gigahertz, and the Adreno 620 GPU that was in the, I'm sorry, I'm getting that wrong, Adreno 642L. You know what? I'm reading this wrong. Why am I reading this live? I should have done more preparation in the beginning. But what I'm getting at here is, though, if you experienced any of the performance from a Snapdragon 765 last year, this is essentially an upgrade across the board for premium mid-tier phones like the Pixel 4a 5G and the Pixel 5 last year. Phones like that are going to get a big speed boost and potentially a battery life boost as well. These chips are made on TSMC 6 nanometer. So assuming the typical Qualcomm advancements in perf per watt and the advancements of the more advanced manufacturing process, should be really nice for mainstream phones.
Yeah, I feel like chips like this are just made for me, because I'm not gaming on my phone. I'm not doing anything too intensive. I'm just doing regular tasks, email, web browsing, etc. Watching some video, and it gives me that battery life. I don't need to flex with the latest and greatest 800 series chip. These are great.
See, I'm an iPhone user, which means it's the best because Apple told me it's the best. So that's all I have to say. I don't get on with Android, so it's hard for me to sort of really dive into this. But I can appreciate the technologies that are there, and especially the fact that they are, generally speaking, more affordable than the alternative, should we say?
Yeah, like these guys are probably going to land in the sub $700 phones and some of the really more affordable devices as well. Wouldn't be surprised to see this in a Pixel 6. I have no confirmation, totally speculating, but considering that Google went mainstream with the last gen and they were fairly well received, I would not be surprised to see this arrive in a phone like that. But a whole bunch of partners, Motorola, Honor, Oppo, Realme have all jumped on board already. So I expect to see these showing up fairly quickly, when I believe they're shipping in the summer and in Q2.
Right. And like with the drives, I think it's another case where, you can see the differences in the benchmarks, but are you going to feel the difference in the real world? Probably not so much, unless
Yeah, I mean, unless you're
doing
running the
something really
latest
intense.
games.
Yeah, I think it depends on use case scenarios, tasks, and stuff like that. If you're doing something that is constant compared to something that you're doing short hits of something, battery life obviously, it works in different ways for different tasks and stuff like that. So, yeah, I guess a lot of it's going to come down to getting it in your hand and seeing what works for you and you know, how that battery life and I mean, just turned off some of the features. Like it's 5G. I don't know what it's like in America, but over here we get 5G in London. Other than that, that's pretty much it. So why would you have it enabled? Disabling it will obviously give you more battery life.
I'm up in the Great Forest of Maine, so I'll maybe see 5G when 9G is around. So
I'm spoiled. I get it at home, but it's still being built out, so it's limited. Like the performance is lower than the 4G network around here because they're intentionally limiting bandwidth. But it's coming in the metropolitan areas, obviously.
Yeah.
Cool. So I will move on from that. And I think it's probably time to jump into the meat of things here. So yesterday, NVIDIA announced that for newly manufactured GeForce 3060 Ti, 3070, and 3080 cards, that there will be limited hash rate versions hitting shelves from numerous partners. And if you remember from the 3060 launch, I want to say back in February, the original 3060s launched with one of these hash rate limiters. It was bypassed by an accidental driver leak. Maybe it was accidental, maybe it wasn't. But these next gen cards I shouldn't say next gen. These updated cards will address a much larger chunk of the market. And the theory is that with a less desirable hash rate, they will be less attractive to miners, and therefore fewer miners will scoop them up and buy them, and they'll land in gamers' hands potentially at price points closer to MSRP. Now, we know what the market's like over here on this side of the pond. Andy, actually, it should give you a second. So, why don't you fully introduce this site? I'm sure lots of HotHardware readers and viewers know your site because you've been online for a long time. But why don't you introduce yourself first? Tell everybody where they can find you, and then I want to hear what the market's like over on your side of the pond.
Sure. So I'm Andy Raffel, owner of eTeknix.com. I guess it's not just eTeknix.com anymore. We're on YouTube and every form of social media. I'm actually on TikTok. I'm pretty much the only kind of mainstream media who is on TikTok. But yeah, I've been doing this for 12 years now as that site. I used to run a different site when I was younger, when I didn't have gray hair, but that's kind of where I am now. And I guess in the same boat as you guys, that GPUs are just the thing that everyone's talking about, yet they don't want to hear about, if that makes sense. It's a tricky one. And over here, I think we're in exactly the same boat with, if you can get hold of a card, and that's a big if, you are going to pay over the odds for it. And these LHR cards, I don't know. I think I'm in two minds about. And
yeah, I haven't made up my mind either. If I put my businessman hat on, you have a product, NVIDIA's GeForce products, right? The fact is that's their gaming product, right? They want those in the hands of gamers. They want gamers buying GeForce. That doesn't mean you can't buy a card and use it for other stuff. If you buy it, it's yours. You do what the heck you want with it. But the market conditions are such that the miners are gobbling. Well, it's not just miners, also scalpers now gobbling them up. But you have crypto miners gobbling up the cards, driving up demand, driving up the price, and now your gaming product gamers can't buy, and that really damages your image as a company. It just damages everything about that space. So what do? You try to make the cards less desirable, right?
It's it's one of the ones where I'm in two minds because, like you said, if you buy a card, that is my card. I can do with it as I please. You're now telling me that I can't. It's a bit like the whole thing when people said about buying electric cars and you never technically own the batteries. I mean, if I'm paying for the car, I want the car, everything included. So it's the same thing. And I guess for a lot of people, especially with the inflated pricing at the moment, it does allow you to sit there with your card, and in the spare time that you're not using it to game, you can recoup some of that money that you've had to pay above and beyond MSRP prices. So that's kind of the silver lining in it. So these cards would have to come out at MSRP. Otherwise, you're sitting there going, well, what's the point? I'm not going to be able to recoup back any money because, well, you can't mine on them to the same kind of standard. So, but that's only one piece of the puzzle, right? There's still so many other things, like the shortages of materials that TSMC can't work with. I was speaking to one brand and they said, we have cards made. The problem we have is there is a cardboard shortage. We don't have any boxes to put them in. We have no packaging to put them in. That's why they're just sitting there. And I was like, I never thought about that. And it's just,
well,
yeah,
I did
little things, right?
Yeah, I didn't hear about cardboard. I heard about lots of other stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of a packaging for the chips and and substrate being hard to come by and contention for wafer starts, but I didn't hear about cardboard. That's really funny.
Yeah,
just shrink wrap them.
Yeah, the biggest thing is, and I was told this by a couple of different brands in the UK, as well as distributors, as well as people actually in Taiwan and China, and they're saying, yeah, we have shortages of raw materials, whether it be the plastic or the metal that you're using to make the shrouds on the graphics cards, whether it's the cardboard, whether it's the plastic sleeving, the bags, the anti-static bags, all this stuff, and it all adds up.
That's pretty nuts. That's crazy. Chris, I'm sorry to cut you off. You were going to say something.
I was just saying, I guess it makes sense when you look at the prices of lumber at your Home Depot, Lowe's, or anywhere else. It's just more difficult to move raw materials around, so those kinds of things are going to add up. I've seen it trying to get a transfer belt replaced in a laser printer. That's held up because of part shortages and on and on and on. It's to say it's a complex issue is definitely understating it.
The other big thing, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the cost of actually shipping. So from China, from Taiwan, the shipping containers. So on average, a container from China, Hong Kong, Singapore to the UK used to cost around, in dollars, about $1,200 to $1,500. I know brands now who are paying upwards, or distributors are upwards to $15,000 for the same container.
Smokes.
So I did some maths and I worked out average mid-tower computer cases, it was adding about $30 extra on top. Now, the distributors aren't going to want to swallow that cost. The retailers aren't going to want to swallow that cost. Between them, they might be able to swallow some of it, but that's just for cases, as a for instance, on a 40-foot high cube. These things are all adding up. And once you actually pay that cost, that doesn't guarantee you even have a space on the vessel. If you want to guarantee that space, well, you're going to have to pay some more money.
Now, I don't want to get too far off track, but is that because of Brexit or because of market conditions right now?
That's not just the UK. That's everywhere in the world.
That's okay. So coming out of Taiwan, the container ships are just exponentially more expensive. Wow.
I'll send you some pictures after this, but I've got pictures of containers just literally sitting at the side of a road and at docks and things like that. And yeah, it's crazy. So that is just another thing that's adding to it. So everyone says, oh, it's all about the miners, it's all about the scalpers. They're just two parts of it. There's so many more things.
And on top of that, I was reading that with those container ships, in the last few months, there have been more containers knocked off overboard into the ocean than we've seen over a span of like 3 or 4 years beforehand. So there's even more going on, whether that's they're just skipping on safety regulations to try and speed up and get things going or what. But it's just...
then there was the boat in the Suez Canal as well. So that added to it. And I mean, the amount that was costing per minute, per second was just astronomical. So again, it all adds up. So when people go, oh, it's just because of the miners, that's why I can't get a graphics card. And when I do, it's this cost. That is some of it as well. So there's so much more to the story. I did a video all about this that really sort of goes through all these reasons. And people still aren't happy, even though it's
now. What's your audience's take? Now, I know how our audience has reacted. I don't want to say it's been evenly split. I think most of the hardcore gamers have been, screw the miners. I just want a new card, and they've been dying for a card. But there's been a vocal contingent that's kind of angry that, that a potential future purchase, they're not going to maybe not get the hash rate they want. Now, we should mention, to be clear, it's only on the Ethereum algorithm where the hash rate's limited. For other coins, it's still, you still get full speed, but the other coins, perhaps it's not efficient to do so. But what's your audience's take? Are you guys split over there? Are you happy with a move like this by NVIDIA? Because at least they're doing something. What has your audience been saying?
So I think it is kind of split. I know people who ordered a 3080 on launch day and are still waiting. They were somewhere in the queue and then they got knocked back in the queue because the retailer wasn't getting the stock they was expecting. So they're kind of sitting there still annoyed and everything. I think a lot of people share the same concerns that I've got of we need to know what price they're going to come in at. You know, if they're going to come in at MSRP pricing, that definitely makes it better. If they're still going to be slightly inflated, but you're not going to be able to recoup some of that cost back like you would by mining in your spare time, that's really going to, you know, turn people very, very sour. And the problem I've got as well is, like you mentioned, NVIDIA did this on the 3060, and then, you know, and they said, and I know the guy who said it as well, so no disrespect to him. You know, he's a good guy, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about at NVIDIA. He said, you know, it's not just a driver level, it's driver, software, hardware, BIOS, everything. And then suddenly a driver nerfed it. It's like, was you telling the truth? So it's kind of now, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Are we going to see history repeat itself with that? It's really tricky to sort of think about, right?
Yeah, so part of me, and I'm totally speculating, I didn't bring it up with anybody at NVIDIA, I didn't talk to anybody about this, just totally my weird brain going off the rails. When that happened with the 3060, I wondered if it was on purpose, because there was a lot of some vocal anti-NVIDIA sentiment after that launch. And I thought maybe NVIDIA was hedging their bet, and that driver accidentally leaked to fix it. But this move obviously shows they're serious about it, right? So now the higher end cards, the real high performing mining cards are limited. And, you know, I kind of wonder if it's the right move, but at least NVIDIA's doing something, you know, like that's their gaming brand and you want gamers to enjoy it. So what else do you do?
Right.
You know?
The weird thing is, like you said, you know, obviously, yeah, gamers, so we have to look at 3060 through to 3080 because they're not doing this on 3090, which I said from the beginning isn't a gaming card, even though like 8K gaming, yeah, it's not a gaming card. It's a Titan in drag. And that's just how it is. Now, the weird thing is the 3090 technically is the best performing. You could argue, you know, the 3080, 3070 are the best performing based on how much they cost in comparison, because the 3080 and 3090 mining performance is very similar, but it's a lot cheaper if you can get it for MSRP. So there is that kind of side of it. And I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see if they try and do anything with 3090. The other thing, and you did mention, you know, where's AMD during all this? Why have they not sort of perked up and sort of said, you know, oh yeah, we're going to do something as well? It seems like they haven't had the same amount of flack as NVIDIA have, but you could argue NVIDIA have had more flack because they've got more market share. So you've heard about it more. Maybe that's the reason behind it.
Yeah, I don't know. We did bring it up on a previous cast where we had guests from AMD, and you know the answer was, you know, their Radeon is focused on gaming and they just want to talk about gaming. I'm sure there's been plenty of internal discussion because the same thing's happening to them. Like we were talking before the cast, you know, HotHardware, you know, eTeknix, sites like ours, publications like ours, GPUs are like our bread and butter. GPUs are the big story. And we love writing about GPUs because it's fun, it's hot, and readers typically love it. But right now, anytime we post something GPU related, half of the comments are like, oh yeah, but I can't buy it. And people are really sour. So it's a strange time. So, you know, AMD's considering doing something, but what to do is the real difficult question to answer, because as Andy has said, as we said in other casts, it's not just miners. There's so much going on that it's almost impossible to fix with one move. You know, it's so many problems elsewhere. Go ahead.
There is a couple of things that obviously this affects Ethereum at the moment. Well, the big thing is Ethereum has a certain market cap, and I don't know how much you know about kind of different coins and stuff. I like to think I know a little bit, and Ethereum is going to get to a point towards the end of this year where it's going to fork. And that's where we're going to get Ethereum 2.0. So at the moment, while it's using Daiga Hashimoto as the Ethereum kind of way of mining, it is going to fork into something else. That coin, Ethereum 2.0, might not be as profitable. And another coin that uses a completely different algorithm might be more profitable. So then this whole process of let's try and nerf Ethereum mining by the end of this year might just have been a completely pointless task, because it's only going to last from now until Ethereum mining dies or gets too difficult that you can't mine it anymore. So there's that aspect of it, which I don't know. Are they looking to the future, or are they just thinking about the here and now?
I don't have a good answer. Part of me thinks that this is testing out the market reception and developing a mining specific line of products. So we have a question from Lane in the chat asking, are they still looking at releasing mining exclusive sales? Yes. NVIDIA, I think, has 5 cards in the lineup, and they're supposed to be coming, I want to say this quarter, Q2, they're supposed to arrive. So that's as far as I know, and as far as has been publicly stated, that is still happening. What they're going to cost, what availability is like, I don't know, not sure. But that should still be happening. But then now, building on what Andy was just talking about, of course, today, like, the market's completely tanked. So the value just completely crashed. But I'm not going to pretend that I know all the nuance here with the proof of stake versus proof of work. And I know that there's potential for Ethereum in the next few months to switch to a new way to mine that's going to drastically reduce power and the potential value. Andy, are you well versed on that and how that could affect things?
I mean, a little bit. Obviously, there is things like exactly what happened with Bitcoin. Bitcoin got to a point where the difficulty got so high that ASICs had to come out. So people were buying ASICs or ASICs, whatever you want to call them, that basically nerfed the whole reason behind people using consumer grade GPUs to do it. And I mean, we're now in a situation where it's not just GPUs as well. We were talking about this before the stream. Chia mining and using SSDs and things.
Whoa. We don't mention that on this podcast, okay? It's a bad word.
The calculations I did for that were just unreal. At the moment, if you win a coin, which can take obscene amounts of time, your drive would fail before that you wouldn't have even made enough money to buy a new drive to replace a drive that failed. Yes. So, yeah, I love how people are still talking about that. I mean, it's kind of like a completely moot point that is definitely not something to do. Do not go and do that. I don't condone mining. I don't, I'm one of these people. If you want to do it and you own the hardware, do it. And this is my big thing, with the whole buying a GPU that might have half the mining performance. Surely that's your decision if you want to mine on it or not. But I can't see any other way of stopping the miners from buying the cards. But what would be interested is, I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. A company is going to come out with like loot boxes. It's like, right, you've bought a 3060. Which one did you buy? Yeah.
I was just, that is funny. That, there is going to be, we should probably clear that up for people that might be wondering. The new cards will supposedly clearly be marked with LHR, light hash rate. So what you're getting out of the gate. NVIDIA worked with their partners to ensure that cards and packaging and listings online will all have LHR in the listing. So you should know which one you're getting. And it's obviously, but there's going to be a transition where both are available for a while. And that's going to definitely cause some confusion. But I want to put you on the spot for a second. I want to have some fun. You are the CEO of one of the major, GPU builders, and you're faced with this problem. Any ideas what you would do to try to address this?
Yeah, talk about putting me on the spot. How do you address this? I
mean, I've got an idea.
Talk to us, Chris. Enlighten us, baby.
So, I mean, it's really easy to get online and order a bunch of cards. So what if we pushed at least more of the market, a higher percentage of the market, through good old brick and mortar retail, and have the partners enforce limits, 1 card per person or 2 card per person, and do some kind of more physical check that way. So yeah, you're going to have some store owners who are going to be corrupt and sell a whole pallet to someone because they slipped them some cash. But I think it might make it just more difficult. You couldn't algorithm shop that way.
I can only see one problem with that, and I think that comes down to if you live somewhere remotely. If you're living in California and or other places where you got a micro center here, and in the UK we've got Currys and places like that on every corner. If you live remotely, you're going to kind of feel like you've been penalized against just because you live in the middle of nowhere. But I have no other solution, so I'm going to say your idea is the best idea because I have nothing else. Yeah.
And it's see, that's a good idea, but I'm cynical and I'm old, right? And these companies producing these chips, right? They're the smartest people in the world making these chips, right? We've sat in briefings where I've left, my brain has been melted, and you just know how intelligent all of these people are. if they wanted to put mechanisms in place to make it harder to buy the cards, they would have, right? The fact is, they want to sell as many as they can for as much as they can, right? So, the retailers might do a little something here and there to limit things, but the fact is, as long as they're selling them, what do they care, So it really comes down to, in my opinion, the manufacturers thinking of some way to make the product less desirable to the group you don't want to buy it. And in that regard, that's really the solution, right? You have to do something to make it not desirable for mining. How do you do that? You nerf the performance, I think. But again, I haven't fully made up my mind. I just thought this was an interesting discussion,
Yeah, I think the big thing as well is if you can, say, turn the miners off of it, you're still going to have the scalpers to deal with as well. And my biggest problem with scalpers is scalpers wouldn't exist without people allowing them to exist. So if I'm a scalper and I've got all these graphics cards, I'm like, hey, do you want to buy this 3060 for $2,000? And you're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, but you really want it. And you're like, okay. And it's like, cool, I've done my job. You've allowed me to do my job. So I know it's really hard because obviously everyone wants the latest and greatest stuff. But all the time that people are still buying off scalpers, you're giving them a business model. So, I mean, once we deal with the miners, how do we then deal with the scalpers? Yeah. This, again, so many pieces to it.
And I think that's a very similar argument we hear with games that are full of microtransactions. People say, well, if you don't like it, just don't buy the microtransactions. It's that easy. But it just takes some whales who, in this case, tend to be the crypto miners who support the market and, make life miserable for everyone else. And it's really tough to beat the minorities in these cases. It doesn't take a lot of people. It just takes very well-funded people, or at least people who don't like their wallets, I guess.
The amount of people I know as well who have, we've got our own Discord server, and on there, the amount of people who come on like, I hate miners, dirty, scummy miners, and, proper sort of raging. And then they're moaning because they haven't got the card. As soon as they get the card, they come back and they're like, I've made this much by mining in my spec. I was like, hold up, wasn't you saying last week this? And now you're saying that. But I get it. If you spent $300-400 more than what you were planning to above MSRP, how else are you going to do that? You're either going to work, your backside off to try and recoup some money, or hold up, I've got this thing that can make me money next to me when I'm not using it. I mean, it's a logical thing, right? And this is my big thing with the LHR cards. You're not going to be able to do that. So I think we need to know more from NVIDIA about when these come in stock. Are they going to be MSRP pricing, or are they going to be close to MSRP pricing? Because if they're not, I just think people are going to revolt against NVIDIA to a certain degree.
Right. And even if they're launching at MSRP, again, how do you stop the scalpers from taking it and ramping it up on eBay and everywhere else? And sorry, Marco has been popping in and out in the background. So I think he's back.
Chrome just crashed on me. I got back in though.
Switch to Edge.
Yep.
You're probably right.
Plug Edge. But yeah, so you've got that issue, and then the other thing is just the nature of the market for crypto mining, because supply and demand doesn't really work with it. Because if you have the cards and you're mining and you're making a profit, what are you going to do? You're going to reinvest your earnings into more hardware to make even more profit, and it's just a never-ending cycle. So you can change the hashing algorithms and everything else, but there's going to be something that's profitable to someone with the hardware, and they're going to find a way to do it.
Especially if you've got, like, say, a 3060 and, you're mining away, everything's good because, that wonderful driver that accidentally went out there. So you've got that and you're going, hold up, yeah, I'm making a little bit of money here. I'm just a one-man operation with my gaming PC. In my spare time, I do this. You're going to go, oh, a 3070. I'm going to buy that because I could probably sell my 3060 for a decent amount of money and get some extra mining before. So all that's going to happen is you're just going to move up the scale to a certain degree. I mean, that's not everyone, but there are going to be people out there who do that. And they're in a win-win situation because they get to then play their games at, higher FPS. And in the spare time, they get to make more money.
Yep. So before my browser crashed, there was a comment from somebody. I'm going to pronounce the name wrong if I'm even remembering it right. It was like Pizzini something. I'm sorry for mispronouncing it, but asking why don't they just make two different types of GPUs? GPUs for miners, GPUs for gamers. That's sort of what NVIDIA is doing. they're harvesting dies and cards that would not necessarily have made it onto GeForces, and they are coming out with the CMP HX line of cards specifically for miners. But in terms of the architecture and the chips, these really wide processors with tiny cores are what are good for mining. So it's hard to differentiate. It's hard to. Of course, there are ASICs, like for Bitcoin, it is really no point in mining on a GPU because the power costs more than what you'll make. But there are specialized chips, application-specific integrated circuits, ASICs, for Bitcoin mining that are worthwhile. So like eventually maybe there'll be something specific that comes out like that. But for now, we're dealing with the GPU issue.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go with Dave's comment that you can still mine with these cards at a reduced rate, but I think the goal is that reduced rate makes it so that your efficiency gains aren't there. So it costs you more in electricity to mine than you're making back in your Bitcoin, unless you hold on to it like Dogecoin and turn the 18,000 Dogecoin I mined back in 2014 on a 650 Ti because I was bored into something like $10,000 now if I still had it. But of course, I gave it away the last time it bumped a little bit back in 2017. Yeah.
See, I still have my Dogecoin. I've got 111,000 of them bad boys.
There you go.
Kind of. They're in Cryptopia, which for anyone who remembers got hacked. So I'm having to go through their whole administration process with their solicitors. And yeah, it's just... the way I see it, I probably haven't got it. But if I get something, happy days. They're probably waiting for it to go like right down. And then they're like, here's your coins. Yeah, right. Because it will cost them less money, right?
Yeah, so I don't trust any of the exchanges, to be honest.
No. One thing one of my viewers did say to me about the whole LHR thing is, like, obviously it's the same card, but it's doing half the hash rate. Why can't NVIDIA just, I don't know, sweeten the deal a little bit? Just give you something a little bit more, like a small performance increase to say, okay, these are the LHR ones. They're aimed at gamers. We're going to do it for X price, but you're going to get that little bit extra gaming performance. I understand it's going to alienate the people who already have bought them cards as non-LHR ones, but I don't know, maybe that would just put some faith back into how people think about NVIDIA and, the way that things have been, because it's been a long time this has been going on. So I just feel like, yeah, maybe something needs to be just that extra little bit of sweetness to it.
Bump the VRAM.
Well, I think that the global shortage, I don't think this was their strategy from the start. And I think the shortages have limited what all of the GPU makers wanted to do. I would have bet the farm months ago that we would have already had TIs, with much more memory, a whole new, top end lineup, but the market conditions are as such where that's just not feasible right now. So it's not happening. So instead, we're getting refreshed cards that already exist. It was probably, and I'm totally guessing, again, I'm speculating, NVIDIA no one from NVIDIA hinted at any of this with me, but I would have bet that should the hash rate limiter have been popular with gamers, it would have just debuted on a whole fresh line of TIs, and then the TIs would have phased out the first gen cards, and we'd be there with that. But because things are what they are, it's like, okay, let's test it out with existing brands, see how it goes, and then we'll see what happens when the TIs come.
Talking about the TIs, did you actually see today? There's going to be the 3080 Ti, 3070 Ti reveal at Computex from NVIDIA. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one, because normally
is it definite? Yeah, is it definite? I know Fish is doing the talk. Is doing the talk at Computex, doing the keynote. But is it like a special GeForce event? Did they announce it?
So I've got a script here, which one of my guys has wrote for me. I'm actually recording a video probably in about 12 hours time. Following an official announcement, NVIDIA has confirmed that they're going to be getting Computex 2021 started with a big bang with their keynote address. I don't know whether it's fully confirmed, but I guess it's one of the things of the overall opinion is this, that, and the other. Obviously, there's certain things we may or may not know within the industry, but NDAs obviously restrict certain things, and I'm not saying a single word more without my lawyer.
I understand completely, Andy.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of inevitable, I guess. So take from that what you will, but it's been speculated since pretty much since 3080 and 3070 came out that there was going to be a TI. I think people initially said it was going to launch in January, and that didn't happen. So Computex makes sense, right?
I think so. I mean, yeah, you know, especially when the 3060 came out with more memory than the 3080, you kind of knew that something was going to happen. You know, something's going to happen at the high end, but exactly what it is, you know, we just have to wait and see. But, you know, I think we've been hearing rumblings of TI like literally from the beginning.
See, part of me wonders if the production schedule hasn't changed a bit, and they were originally targeting January, February for launch, and they just decided, okay, we're going to hold off on that, keep producing so we have a bigger stockpile at launch to finally release it and maybe garner some goodwill that way. But I don't see how, even with stockpiling cards like that for the launch, how you keep up with the insane demand that has been happening. Again, maybe with the exchange rates crashing today, people will dump their cards, but yeah, I think it's still going to be tough.
I mean, the other thing is you always like to think AMD and NVIDIA, AMD and Intel, they always kind of wait for the other one to do it, you know, to make a move of some kind. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but, you know, there was leaks of 6500 XT and 6600 XT. So it's kind of like, okay, this is good. We're getting, you know, a card with decent performance for a reasonable amount of money. NVIDIA are like, yeah, here's 3070 Ti. It happens all the time, right?
Right. Well, and then if you looked at NVIDIA's lineup, right, it launched with no superlatives. It was, you know, 3070, 3080, 3090. So what happened to supers and TIs, right? You know that the whole reason it was that lineup was to have that wiggle room in between. You know, that was the whole point with that branding. So, you know, absolutely.
Especially with 3080 and 3090, right? Because the disparity between them two cards was huge. Like the price gap between them was just ridiculous. Yeah. Something that goes in the middle, right?
Right, it's coming. So we have another question from Periscope from the same viewer. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. So I want to say it's Pazuzu Hanbi. He's asking, do you think they'll build another monster Titan? Well, the 3090 is a Titan. Jensen Huang basically went on record to say the 3090 is the new Titan and the 3080 was the premium gaming card. I like the Titan branding though, so I wouldn't be surprised if it came back at some point. Just not in this current gen. I don't think they're going to use it for this gen of Ampere. Maybe it comes back in the future. NVIDIA is known for, you know, rejiggering things often, so we'll see. But yeah, right now the 3090 really is the Titan. Think of the 3090 as Titan.
What would they call it? Because obviously the current Titan is, you know, RTX. This is still RTX. So what would it be, Titan 2, or what would you call it?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I like what they were doing back in the day when you had Titan, and then they had, you know, the Titan XP when it was Pascal. So just throw a moniker on there that shows the architecture.
Right. Well, it was officially the Titan X, and I think the community added the little P on there to distinguish it. But the other nice thing about the Titans, at least early on with the Titans, is you got that double precision performance as well. That I don't. Yeah. I mean, I don't think the 3090 has it, right?
I think it does. I don't remember though, so I don't want to say the wrong thing. But you know, because one of the tests that I ran was something. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I believe it does, but I'm not sure, so I shouldn't say anything.
Yeah, because I know there were a couple generations of Titan at least that didn't, and that was its own controversy at its own time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has. I'm just looking. Yeah, it does have multiple precision levels, so
they wouldn't have that to throw over it.
No, exactly. The weirdest one for me with the 3090 was the fact that, you know, they said this is basically Titan, but then they also tried branding it as a gaming card. And I think there was only me and one other person in the world when it launched who actually did 8K testing. And it was weird because who games at 8K? The monitor, and I was using a monitor. You had to be at a certain distance to it. If you were going with the TV, obviously you'd be a lot further back and things would probably be a lot more kind of leisurely. But then you're less likely to notice the pixel density of 8K because you're so far away that you can't really appreciate it in comparison to 4K. It's just one of the things of like, we get it. You know, you want to sort of say you're the Bugatti Veyron of, you know, the Volkswagen world. And they just wanted to show something off. But it was just really mixed messages when it came to, is it a gaming card or is it a compute card? Because you kind of said that it's both.
I've got it. They can do a Titan with a higher hash rate, so all the miners get that and leave everything else alone.
There you go. There you go. So we have two on saying Titan RTX Black Edition. Yeah, maybe. And then we have a question from Alien Bean saying, so how about that 3050? You think they'll bring back a low profile? I don't think it's up to NVIDIA. If the 3050 is low power enough and there's need for a low profile card, I absolutely think some partners would do it. I mean, you've seen ASUS build not low profile, but like small high performance cards. So something low power like a 3050, I would expect to see a low profile from at least some partner at some point. Yes.
You don't think we'll see a 2650?
What? Say that again, Chris? Sorry.
I said you don't think we'll see a 2650?
A 26? No. What the heck would a 2650 be?
a 1650 bumped up without the RTX because they like to screw with the naming.
Interesting.
I don't know.
I don't know.
We've seen so many different things. Like I'm sure everyone knows about the whole hardware unbox saga. It's like you're not testing our features well enough. Blah 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 blah. So what was their words? When it comes to ray tracing, we're going all in. So I don't know. Maybe GTX is now kind of dead. The weird thing is, you have to remember. I'm looking at the Steam survey now. GTX 1060 is still the most popular graphics card out there. The 6 gig one as well. So what is the natural successor to that? Because it's not really 3060. There has to be something slightly lower, and it has to be at a really competitive price point. But especially with AMD coming out with like a 5500 XT, there has to be something to kind of battle that on that price level. So it's going to be interesting to see, if anything comes out there.
And the way some people talk about ray tracing, I feel like they'd pay more to just not have ray tracing on the card, but that's a whole other topic. I don't personally understand the hate for ray tracing. It's all eye candy. That's what a GPU does. And ray tracing makes for very nice eye candy. Yeah, it's a big performance hit right now, but it's going to get worked out. It's going to get better, just like every new technology they add into these cards.
I mean, do you remember when it first came out? I remember Battlefield was the first game, wasn't it, that had ray tracing?
I think so.
Battlefield 5, yeah. And I mean, it looked amazing, but yeah, the hit was just huge. Even, then DLSS came, which some people do argue DLSS, if you really crank it up to the extreme, it can make the game look really grainy, which, I've seen firsthand. Look at Cyberpunk. Turn the DLSS right up and it does exactly that. It just takes away that kind of crispness to it. But things have got better because, things do mature. And that comes down to the game developers, the drivers, as well as NVIDIA working directly with the game developers. So, it's really weird when people, especially when they compare what NVIDIA are doing now with ray tracing compared to what AMD are doing now. And it's like, well, if you want to be fair, you should be comparing AMD now compared to where NVIDIA were at that point. Then it would be fair. But, people don't work like that.
Yeah, I kind of see it both ways because, well, if I'm going to go out and buy a card today, I'm going to get the one that has the more mature product. So in that respect, yeah, if you really want the ray tracing, NVIDIA is still the way to go. But I think, Marcos pointed out before that had AMD beat NVIDIA to the punch with this graphics card generation, they would have had the fastest ray tracing on the market at the time. It's just that, NVIDIA had the ability to get there first.
Yep. So, and I'm gonna age myself a bit here, but the argument, the discussion you guys were just having, it was the same discussion that the audience had when 3DFX came out with anti-aliasing, and that it was a great image quality enhancement, but it tanked performance. So some people weren't happy, some people loved it. Like I remember seeing it for the first time live. It was in a hotel room in New York on Falcon 3.0 and watching the Jaggies disappear from the mountains. I could never not play with anti-aliasing moving forward. And then it happened again when, NVIDIA, I want to say it was with the TNTs, that generation of cars, NVIDIA and S3, when 32-bit color was becoming a thing, and it was lower performance versus 16-bit. Why would you do that? Because it looks almost the same with alpha blending, but the ray tracing is inevitable. We're going that way. Everybody supports it, including the consoles. So if you're not a fan of ray tracing, get over it because it's coming. It's coming everywhere.
Yep. Speaking of the consoles, I mean, that's AMD. Right. So clearly, there is something more to it than just ray tracing NVIDIA. That's kind of, I think people have still got that in their heads. It's like as soon as you hear ray tracing, all you can see is that green RTX on logo. And I think slowly over time, obviously that's going to change people's perception. It's going to be more widespread, especially I guess there's more consoles getting people's hands because there's even stock shortages of them as well. So I don't know. The whole world's screwed right now.
But they're smart because RTX is a lot shorter to put in a tweet than ray tracing is. So you get that branding in there by default. Even if people are talking about AMD, I still see them say RTX. And it's like, no, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right, we've kind of gone off the rails versus the crypto discussion, and we're bumping into the hour, and I know it's way past Andy's bedtime, so should probably start to wrap things up. Before we do, I want to pimp the contest again, though. So everybody that wasn't here in the beginning, and if you weren't here for the last cast or haven't been to Hot Hardware, first, shame on you. But secondly, we have an awesome giveaway running with Falcon Northwest for a completely Destiny 2 themed. Gorgeous Talon PC. It's over Chris's shoulder. You've probably seen it throughout the whole cast. AMD Ryzen 7 5800X 8-core, an RX 6800 GPU in there. A Seagate FireCuda SSD, plenty of RAM, gorgeous case. Just an absolutely awesome machine. All you have to do to win is stop by the site. There's I think you have 20 different options to enter through the Gleam widget. So if you haven't already, please go check that out and definitely stop by the site and get in on this action. You would love to have this PC. It is, I want to say it's like $5,000. It's open to
4,700, something like that.
Yeah,
That's
US and Canada. Yeah, exactly. So it's open to US and Canada. So if you're here to see Andy, sorry, and you're one of his audience from the other side of the pond, sorry. Maybe next one will be worldwide, but we got to do what we got to do.
And I just want to say the interior of the system is immaculate. One of the cleanest setups I've seen, regardless of if you care about Destiny or not, which I do. It's an awesome game. But even if you don't care about Destiny, the interior of the system, the way it's put together, everything is just top tier. Love it. Yeah, it's just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful machine. And before we go, Andy, pimp your site. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yep. So obviously we have the website, eTeknix.com. And then if you want to see more of my face, then youtube.com/eTeknix. And all the social media channels are just the same, eTeknix. Like I say, we're on TikTok as well. Something you guys should look into. I think, Marco, you'd be really good doing like some dancing and stuff on there.
Oh, God, you don't want to see that. Not at all. Not even a little bit. Chris, maybe.
No, I'm legally barred from dancing, singing, anything of the sort.
Gotcha. And all kidding aside, I really want to thank Andy for coming on. Lots of people in the industry are very competitive, and all I did was put up a Facebook post and say, "Hey, anybody else with the channel want to come on the podcast and chat?" And he jumped right in. There was like literally no issues. I've known Andy for years. He's a cool dude. There is room for all of us to do well, and I'm really happy that we had a fun conversation. And I really appreciate you coming on. It was really cool of you. That was awesome, Andy. I know it's late as well, so we really appreciate it. And I should probably tell everybody where you can find us. We are all over the web as well. Obviously, HotHardware.com, YouTube.com/HotHardware, Twitter.com/HotHardware, Twitch.com/HotHardware. And I have to mention, we started a Patreon very recently. I always forget to mention it, but if you want to support the site and support, independent publications, we are just a bunch of guys that love this stuff and love writing about it. If you want to support us, please check out our Patreon. That is available as well. And with that, Chris, unless I missed anything, Chris, did I miss anything?
I think you got it.
Cool. Then I think we will bid you goodbye. Thanks for hanging out.